the LGBTQ community taking a hold of our constitutional democracy that the heart fought for us all, and really celebrating the triumphant fights that we have won, and the many more fights that are ahead of us. So my name is Omar van Reenen. I am the co-founder of Equal Namibia and a civil rights activist. Equal Namibia is Namibia's largest youth-led movement fighting for LGBTQ civil and human rights to its fullest extent enshrined in our constitution. And today we are joined by Philip Newell and based on Cloete, what we like to call our freedom fighters and those who have pioneering LGBTQ civil rights cases in our courts of law. We're also joined by Sister Namibia and Pride Pop-Up, as well as our partner organizations like Tiamon, Efano Gallery, Power Back Girls, Shut It All Down, and Prestige Cafe as well. So without further ado, I will move to our first agenda point, and that is Equal Namibia's response to the Ministry of Home Affairs appeal. So firstly, let me put things into perspective for you. 31 years after independence, we are still confronted by the horrors of discrimination. And 31 years after independence, I think we are still fighting for what it truly means to be born free. Because a prerequisite for freedom is equality. And there is no freedom in a born-free Namibia if equality is not afforded to all persons who knock on this republic's doors. 31 years after independence, we still see how state institutions abuse public policy, abuse public office, and step on the constitutional liberty that were hard fought for every Namibian across all corners of this nation. And most importantly, we still see public institutions and ministries abusing taxpayer funds to continue to target, harass, and violate the LGBTQ community and their constitutional liberties. That is not a born-free republic that I grew up in and that I was promised, and that is not the promise of equality that our founding fathers and mothers fought for. In my Equal Namibia's response, I would like to actually quote Judge Masuku Sterling in Yona's citizenship case. And Judge Masuku said that Article 10 deals with the right to equality and not to be discriminated against. In this case, I cannot help but note that a serious attitude of discrimination appears to rear its ugly head in this matter. It must be chopped off, even ruthlessly, because it does not resonate with the vision of the founding mothers and fathers of this nation, who conceived Namibia as, amongst others, to be a secular state founded on the rule of law and justice for all. I may add that for all applies to all people in Namibia, regardless of your gender and sexual orientation. That is the strongest verdict that has been afforded to the LGBTQ community. That has been the strongest verdict that has conceptualized what equality truly means, what Article 10 truly means for all persons in this nation. It is truly disheartening to see the ministry use children as collateral to their state-sanctioned homophobia. What is state-sanctioned homophobia? State-sanctioned homophobia is when a minister abuses their public office to violate the rights of LGBTQ persons. But now children have become collateral to that. President Guy Cook said that the Namibian house is all-inclusive, and it is a refuge for all children. So to him I might ask, which children? Whose children? Because inclusivity does not exclude children of LGBTQ persons after independence, we see a government steadfast in the ideology rooted in how apartheid treated dissidents, telling the LGBTQ community that they cannot love one another solely based on their gender identity and sexual orientation. So how far have we come? How born-free are we? And lastly, if I may add, our community is constantly told that now is not the time for your civil and human rights. That has to wait, because that is not bread and butter issues. Separating the family and declaring violence as stateless is bread and butter issues. If you don't get a job in this country because of who you love, it is a bread and butter issue. If you are thrown into poverty in this country because of your gender identity, that is a bread and butter issue. And our community will no longer tolerate our rights being violated, us pushed onto the margins of society and living in a gray zone, to wait for the time to be right, for us to be considered in this notion of bread and butter issues. And if the government actually cared about bread and butter issues, they would not constantly use a ministry to target LGBTQ persons and their families and abuse taxpayer funds to launch the appeal in this case. And as I mentioned, LGBTQ rights are the civil rights issue of our generation. And it is the civil rights issue that disproportionately affects the youth of this country. If this is a government that cares about uplifting the youth, you will start with eradicating sexual and gender-based violence and affording the LGBTQ community their civil and human rights. Now, today. I would like to call up my colleague and co-founder of Equal Namibia, Ndilokelo Wantengwe, to share a few more words.
Thank you again. I'm just going to jump straight into it. State-sanctioned homophobia is not merely a term that civil rights groups and LGBTQ plus members sucked out of our tongues. It is a real, materially impactful term with far-reaching, devastating consequences. It is when the government removes protections for sexual, gender, and sex minorities from the Domestic Violence Act, further rendering a community of people and families to sexual and targeted abuse. It is when the police target transgender and gender non-conforming individuals, meting out abuse, isolating them, and unlawfully arresting them in the process. State-sanctioned homophobia is when we as a democracy governed by a constitution continue to pussyfoot around the decree and repeal of the sodomy law, which continues to criminalize consenting adults, violating their dignity, which leads to another component of state-sanctioned homophobia, why we are here today also. It is when the Ministry of Home Affairs targets these days same-sex consenting adults to degrade their status. So if we are serious about equality, equity, and justice for all, we need to be serious about why we decide to uphold our oath in office as duty bearers and public office bearers, which is why we call a spade a spade. Until we see institutional and constitutional reform, it is called state-sanctioned homophobia. When we have more than a handful of cases ongoing with a specific ministry, that is what you call state-sanctioned homophobia. And it will remain state-sanctioned homophobia until we see fundamental and radical shifts in the mindsets, the policies in the country, and using them to institutionally target and abuse not just one family or two families or one transgender individual, but a cohort of community people in our country. Once again, we need to ask ourselves the question, if we are serious about equality, equity, and justice in the country, then we need to answer ourselves the questions for why we became public office bearers, and that oath that we need to uphold as part of our constitutional progress in the country. Thank you. I'd like to call on Philip, that will also then give their remarks.
Thank you very much, Omar and Dino. First of all, for standing by us through all this time, because as a family, I think this is really what has taken us to what is now already 2 years of harassment at the hands of the Ministry of Homophobic Affairs, as we like to refer to it. Now, we were just a month ago excited about this judgment in the High Court, which indeed, as Omar mentioned, had recognized sexual orientation for the first time as a ground for non-discrimination, and thereby really gave effect to the sort of ambitions of the Constitution that prevents discrimination. Now, the spirit of the Constitution really is that discrimination that we, of course, know so well historically should never happen again. And it mentions a couple of aspects based on which there should not be discrimination. Now, sexual orientation is not specifically mentioned there, but that does, of course, not mean that we can therefore discriminate based on sexual orientation, and this is something that this judgment had recognized. Now, for us, of course, we'll personally admit that we would get our 3 children would get citizenship, maybe citizenship by descent, and more importantly, that the state recognized that both of us are fathers, irrespective of who has a genetic link or not. Because really, the definition of family, including in our laws and our constitution, is not framed by simple biological facts, but by larger ideas about support and care, structures, families as places where children can grow up to become individuals in this society. And so what it really recognizes is that Namibia has a huge diversity of families and family structures, and this is simply a recognition of that fact. So we were, of course, elated, and we believed that the judgment was so strong that it would be nonsensical to appeal for government, because there was simply no legal basis to argue against this. And so, of course, when we heard that that Home Affairs would appeal, we were obviously taken aback, because we thought not only were we happy, but generally the verdict was positively taken up across society. And as far as we know, there was no sort of formal official backlash from anywhere. So now, what of course this means for our family is that this saga continues to drag on. Our son is nearly 3 years old, and has been in this sort of limbo situation from the beginning. Our twin daughters are 8 months old, and they're essentially in the same situation, not having access to Namibian citizenship that they have a constitutional right to have. On the other hand, we are, of course, in the larger, sort of the larger scope of things, we are convinced that this judgment will stand in the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court will never take a narrow reading of the Constitution. The Constitution is like the compass that really tells us where we're going. And, if the Supreme Court would take such a narrow reading as Home Affairs takes in its sort of appeal application, it would be really a serious problem. Essentially, because sexual orientation is not explicitly mentioned, we cannot kind of use that as grounds for non-discrimination. What that means by implication is that if we decided tomorrow collectively that people with green hair should be incarcerated without a reason, then that would be permissible, because the Constitution doesn't mention specifically that people with green hair should be protected. So you see how nonsensical this is, and we have a strong belief that it will stand, and in fact this judgment will only be strengthened in the Supreme Court. But of course, what does this mean, as a family, as people living in this country, wanting to go about our sort of daily existence? Now, like I said earlier, this saga, the sort of harassment and discrimination of our family has started in January 2020 when my husband was unprocedurally expelled from the country, for lack of, or because his domicile application had, been rejected. And again, a month ago in the Supreme Court, one of the judges, confessed. He said, like, look, this sort of unprocedural treatment is reminiscent of what happened under apartheid to essentially black people who didn't have rights. And once you don't have rights, you know what happens next. You can be treated, in whichever way, and you will not have protection. So the Supreme Court judges recognized this fact and explicitly linked it to the previous dispensation under apartheid. But also, for all this time, the state has denied our people citizenship. They're growing up here, they have their friends here, their family here, their community here. And so, this is something that, of course, they won't understand at this point in time, but it will have, major impacts on their lives going forward. The same state is also not recognizing domicile rights for a husband who has been in this country for more than 10 years, contributing immensely to all kinds of things, especially in the realms of housing and formal settlement, upgrading and urban development. And so, while we believe that these things are strictly about fundamental rights that should not even have to be qualified, on a personal level, it does feel very schizophrenic that here we are, professionally supporting government, in this particular case, through the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, where we, really provide a lot of support and input into things around urbanization, housing policy, and so on. And another arm of government comes and literally pulls the rug under our feet. I mean, this year in April, May, when our twins were not left into the country, we were 2 days away from going into exile. I'm a Namibian citizen. I'm born here. I have my family here. I have my constitutional rights. And simply because things were dragging on, we were 2 days away from moving away and saying, sorry, you can't. I had told my colleagues that I might not come back. And so you can imagine how disruptive this whole thing has been. And that's where you understand that if fundamental rights do not apply to everybody, then we have a huge problem in this country. Because everything else can only come after we are secured in our most basic existence. And so I think what I'd like to say is that what also pains me is that we are sort of socioeconomically in a situation where we can actually fight for our rights. We have access to the law, to legal support. But a vast majority in this country does not have that access. So what this further means is that the law might prevail in the end, but if you're not able to access it for economic or other reasons, then you simply have no basis to stand on. And I think that's again a great concern for the wider community. So all in all, I think to end off, it has been extremely disruptive. At the same time, we have received support from all walks of life, from all levels of society, from all cultural backgrounds, from all ages, and we believe that our society is much more advanced, in terms of tolerance levels than our government wants to believe. And finally, we believe that we are simply continuing the work of, to a large extent, still in power today, and who have given us this powerful tool as a basis for equality. And we are simply holding, the Constitution to the test and saying, well, if we do talk about equality, then it can only be equality for all, not equality for a sort of majority that sort of fits one particular social box. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I stand on your shoulders, the LGBTQ community stands on your shoulders, families in this country as diverse as they come stand on your shoulders, and children in this country stand on your shoulders. So thank you for what you have done. As Philip has said, Namibia is much more tolerant. 55% of Namibians tolerate the LGBTQ community. That's the fourth highest in Africa, according to an Afrobarometer study. Most strikingly, 73% of Namibians believe in civil and human rights protections for the LGBTQ community, according to the Open Sun study. So it is not society that doesn't believe in equality that should be afforded to us. It is the state, and therefore it is state-sanctioned homophobia. One family, 4 court cases. In 2021 alone, the Ministry of Home Affairs has violated so many LGBTQ persons that there is more than 9 court cases that pertain to LGBTQ rights against one single ministry. So when will the President bring this ministry to order? When will the President put his foot down and appoint people to the cabinet that stand on the right side of our Constitution? And with that being said, I would like to share more about a pivotal landmark case in Mercedes on Cloete's case. And I'll have Mercedes just talk a little bit more on that. But essentially, Mercedes' case was about an unlawful arrest, a transphobic unlawful arrest, and a Namibian citizen that was facing police brutality that the ministry is not held accountable. And before we have Mercedes come up, I would like to read two striking arguments in the verdict that Judge Edison Chase has written. In the verdict, Judge Edison Chase said that members of the police force are clothed with authority, including powers of arrest and detention. The authority and position requires them to act with more maturity and caution than any ordinary citizen. In this regard, Officer Kabari was never in a position that warranted his mistreatment of and discrimination against a private individual. And another part of the verdict that really should be celebrated is the following. The insults to the plaintiff, Mercedes, who was humiliated and discriminated against because she is a trans woman, was considered as aggravating. As stated, police officers are obligated by law to protect all members of the Namibian society, regardless of their gender. And that is a landmark recognition of transgender civil rights. So I want to thank you, Mercedes, for not only standing up for transgender persons in this country, who, by the way, generations of trans individuals stand on your shoulders. But I want to thank you for fighting for every Namibian in this country to not be violent against, harassed, and unlawfully arrested by the people who are meant to protect and serve us. And these cases show that 51 years of independence, it is queer people who are conceptualizing what our Constitution means. Mercedes' case is not only landmark for LGBTQ persons, but for every person that faces police brutality in this country. And for that, her fight should be commended. Remember, Philip's case is not only about LGBTQ rights, the right to love, but about children's rights to citizenship, about children's rights to live together with their family, not to be separated, not to be stateless. And it is because of their fight that even heterosexual and opposite-sex families will be able to adopt abroad, will be able to go abroad and have surrogacy. So it is queer persons fighting for that. Their cases and their fight should be commended. So Mercedes, thank you for fighting us for what's right, and for that I'll leave the floor. Singers in the very Americans struggle with innovation.
Thank you guys so much for having me here. It's truly, truly, truly amazing to be in this room, not only making history, but also realizing once again the importance of what care means. And not care only in the household setup or the society setup, but in the national conversation that we're having around what the government has been doing and been continually getting away with, and what we are now to do. It is about active citizenry. It is about taking a stance, whether you're LGBTQ or not. It is about making sure that the generation that is to come, the kids that have to take over the reins from everybody else here, are able to have an equitable, a more just, a more fairer, a more freer, and a more accepted, because tolerance is, maybe it's more in way but they will tolerance. So it's about accepting and becoming the community and the Namibia that we are. It's not been an easy journey. It's been 5 years of absolute hell. And before that, there have been aggravated cases against the Namibian police as well, which unfortunately haven't seen the light of day. And that's why it was so important for me this time around to not only disallow that, but to also persevere and see it through. With that, I really want to thank Omar, Ndilo, Philip, everybody, Zindri, thank you so much for the Pride pop-up and making sure that there's so much color and that we're able to really celebrate our presence here amidst all of the backlash. And just wanted to add to what Omar said. You know, statistics are a wonderful way to be able to look at what the community says. And I get to spend so much time with this community, and boy, oh boy, when we talk about discrimination, there's got a few throw bubbles. And he's usually, and one thing I'll say is, there's a lot of programming that has been happening, there's a lot of indoctrination that has been taking place, and there's not a lot of love and empathy and care and compassion that has been going around. And that's okay, because we're still recovering from our gruesome and horrible apartheid past, and if we are, and when we are ready to heal together as a community and as a nation, then our issues, LGBT issues, issues pertaining to people with disability, these won't be issues that will be sidelined anymore, but will be able to be addressed by each and every one of us if we're able to stand together. I want to say thank you to each and every organization, every person that has had a kind word to say, that has been supported throughout the entire process. I would like to say an even bigger thank you to Eco Namibia that has come out here like the gust of wind and is making the Namibian house shake. Now that's what's supposed to happen. I commend you, Omar. It has really been so incredible to see how you were able to pull together and bring us together to not only be able to say, hey, this is more than a serious conversation and we're done fighting. Now we're about to take back and also celebrate ourselves as an Namibian people. I didn't come here with any notes or preparation. I just came here with a lot of smiles and a lot of gratitude and a lot of thank yous to each and every Namibian that has been supporting with us on our social media, each and every ally, and each and every parent that has got the sensibility enough to now already teach their children about what differences mean and what acceptance means and what it truly means to be a rainbow nation. With that, I would like to say thank you so very much. And for whoever is out there sitting there listening, for whoever this message is going to go out, like myself and Phil, it's a long process, but eventually we'll get there. Don't give up. You matter. Can you say this? We belong in Namibia. We belong. So with that being said, we are going to announce the Namibia Pride Week, and to open up our next section of the press conference, I'd like to call out Bridget from Sister Namibia to just share a few words with us. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm Bridget from Sister Namibia. Sister Namibia has been around for over 30 years, ensuring we played a role in the beginning of the building of our democracy to ensure that women's voices and needs were heard and included in the building of democratic Namibia, independent Namibia. Today, we are still fighting for inclusion and gender justice. As a civil society organization, we have to play a watchdog role. We have to make sure that our duty bearers are upholding their promises to equality, and that every Namibian is protected and served with dignity and respect, and that they have access to protection and services equally. People of the LGBTIQA community are not protected from violence the same way other Namibians are. They're not granted the same rights to family. They're not equally protected in work, in education, in retirement. They don't enjoy fundamental human rights and freedom and dignity. And the levels of discrimination faced is unconstitutional. And these facts are not new to us working in the human rights sector. But we find through our work as Sister, when we do advocacy work and education programs, this shocks your everyday Namibian. Many Namibians do not know the levels of inequality faced, of institutionalized discrimination faced. And this echoes exactly what my colleague here has been saying today. Namibia is not as homophobic as our leaders believe. It is up to us as civil society to challenge them, to show them that they are wrong. Namibia is a tolerant community. Namibia doesn't tolerate discrimination. Namibia believes in equality. 73%, a report put out by the Office of the Ombudsman, of Namibians believe in civil and human rights protections of LGBTIQA persons. So, this is a call to action to Namibians. Stand behind this movement. Let our leaders know that what they are doing is destroying lives. Get involved, stand behind these individuals, behind these groups, and these activists. This, of course, is foremostly a human rights issue, but it is also an opportunity for us to build a better Namibia. The reason we face crisis levels of gender-based violence and inequality and gender injustice is because we have deeply ingrained and harmful ideas and rules and norms around gender. Within these rules, femininity is below masculinity. Men are above women. Power imbalances result in many women and gender non-conforming people being assaulted, harassed, taken advantage of in private and public lives. These boxes that we are all forced into by society cause gender inequality and gender-based violence. And anyone who dares to step out of these boxes are violently pushed back into them. So, we must celebrate diversity, we must embrace gender fluidity, we must break the rigid and harmful norms, we must break the boxes to end violence and power imbalances caused by binary understandings of gender. LGBTIQA inclusion and rights are essential to achieving equality, to achieving gender equality and justice. Sister Namibia and our partners are 100% behind pride in building a powerful LGBTIQA movement. We have to break these rules, we have to break these boxes, and there is so much power in the queer space.
Thank you so much, Lesbian and Sister Namibia, one of our founding coalition members. We could not be here without you today. All right, fellow Namibians, we present to you the Namibia Pride Week. And it is going to be a week where we come together and celebrate intergenerational equality. And we have a powerful intersectional panel of partners that have come together to pool their resources together and pool their visions together, to their communities. And it's just so beautiful what we have planned for you. And this year is truly a year to celebrate our fights and to continue to stand together in community, because only community can win this fight. So the events that we have planned, we are going to just discuss a few of them. All right, so we are going to be starting on Saturday, the 27th of November, with the Feminist Festival, and we'll be going into Sunday with a sunset yoga, and we'll start the week on Monday with a quiz night, a LGBTQ themed quiz night, and TLO will be launching the annual Trans Canada. On Wednesday, we'll be screening Kapala, Namibia's first gay love story and an international award-winning film. And on Thursday, we're going to be having a Love is Love exhibition. On Friday, we will close off the year with our final drag night of the year. And Saturday, we are going to be hosting the Victory Pride Parade, and we'll be ending off with the Pride Pop-Up. I will now hand over to our partners in Pride to discuss a little bit more about each event. Dion?
Okay, so I'll just touch briefly on the Feminist Festival. The Voices for Choices and Rights Coalition will be organizing, of course, with our partners on the Feminist Festival. We really envision this to be one of the first for Namibia Pride to bring intersectional groups and organizations into one space. For the first time, it would not just be, entertainment, but it is really around activism and advocacy in that space. We will have speakers, we will have artists, we will have different DJ lineups, we will have sessions that incorporate and inculcate the various sessions and the various issues that we are currently faced with as women, as non-conforming people, as adolescent girls, for example. And so therefore we call on all feminists and all queer individuals, all intersectional movements to join the Feminist Festival. It will start off from 3 o'clock until 11 p.m., which means that families will also be allowed into the space to enjoy, just the movement, the aura, and the energy. A program will also be provided throughout the day so that everyone knows what sessions we have. We are looking at sessions that look at unpacking, for example, the combating of the Domestic Violence Act, unpacking, for example, what the sodomy law is and what we are looking forward to. Also unpacking, for example, the Abortion and Sterilization Act of 1975. So it is really a space where we are going to conscientize everybody in that space while we are having fun and also definitely continuously advocating and fighting for our human and civil rights. I'll give it over now to the next members so that they continue on the program.
Thank you, Kaluki. So on Sunday, the Sunset Yoga, mental health issues are disproportionately impacted in the LGBTQ community. About 35% of persons who identify as LGBTQ suffer from mental health. So we really want to come together in a healing space as a community, as allies, and just breathe throughout what this year and how this year has impacted us, and just release a lot of pressure on our shoulders. So that's the aim of the Sunset Yoga, and the quiz night at Vinyl's Cafe is really going to be a community event to really unpack LGBTQ history in this country, because as we know, there have been so much LGBTQ activists that have fought for our independence, but they have been erased and saturated from history. Throughout our democracy, there have been so many pioneering LGBTQ individuals. I would even say in this year alone, there's many people in office who are LGBTQ, but they work at the identity of being marginalized and subjugated. So we really want to share with the community who are our queerers, our queer heroes. What is our queer identity in Namibia? What is our history? Where do we come from? So we hope that that event on quiz night will be really a fruitful event to unpack our history at the. I'll also speak a little bit about the transgender calendar. So TMO is the trans diverse movement, a movement of diverse transgender identities, and we'll be launching, as I mentioned, the calendar to really celebrate the community and celebrate their visibility, and it's going to be a really wholesome night, and we hope everybody will attend. And Kapala Screen, Kapala, I would say, is Namibia's most international award-winning film, Namibia's most nominated film, and it is a film about gay love, and it is Namibia's first gay love story in a country where gay men loving each other are criminalized. So we really invite members of the public to come out and watch this film and really unpack how homophobia is impacting our society and where we should move from here. And lastly, the Love is Love exhibition is geared towards elevating and uplifting queer artists, queer work, and that will be hosted at Cafe Prestige. And Drag Night has really propelled this year and flourished this year at Cafe Prestige, which is a safe space for the LGBTQ community. So we are so grateful that the last Drag Night of the year will take place during the Namibia Pride Week, because what's not better than celebrating Pride, than celebrating the diversity in our community and celebrating how drag is not just art but also a political statement as well. And with that, I will call out our colleagues from Pride Pop-Up to talk a little bit about, I'll call out my partner from Equal Namibia to talk a little bit about the Namibia Pride Day and what we have in store for you.
Right, so as Omar has already mentioned, Namibia Pride Week will take place from the 27th of November to the 4th of December. The second last event will be the Pride Parade, which will be taking place on the Friday the 4th of December. The second last event is heading up Pride Pop-Up. The idea is to meet outside of El Barrio on this road, close to the showground, and then take the floating parade really down the Young Street, down Independence, and kind of ending at the Ministry of Justice. We've been reaching out to civil society organizations, to embassies, to companies, or to the business community, companies like Coca-Cola's Holdings, the Columnist Group, the NGN, the New Film Commission, the many, many others, to really allow them and give them a space to show their support, and not just state that they are in support of the LGBT community, but actually show up. So that's really important to us. We'll also be hosting a public rollout on social medias to enable the general public to sign up and take part in our Pride Parade. And so we are excited to see businesses, society organizations, no matter what size of company, just really collaborate with us. We're open to funding, sponsorships. We're really excited to see any kind of collaboration and participation in this Pride Parade. And so it'll be exciting to see the turnouts, people showing up in colorful flags, colorful shirts, and just really seeing the impact that this entire week will really have for the queer community of Namibia. So we're very excited. Thank you. Zulu?
Thank you for the platform. I am Henry from the Pride Pop-Up. Pride Pop-Up was officially started last year, 2020, with the aim of reclaiming form of oppressive spaces for the LGBTIQ plus community, restricting our places where we used to be discriminated against, which is being rejected. So what we did is we decided we are going to take up space, we're going to say no to racial culture, and we are just taking back our voices. With that, we're happy to be a part of the Pride Week. One of these festivities we're having the annual Pride Pop-Up, including our 1 year anniversary, which is also happening in Britain, as well as Ketman's in the same day. So that is about 1 year, and New Year Pride Week. We're happy to announce that. So our activities will start at 1300 hours, just following the Pride Parade at the Chicago Bistro, or restaurant rather. We have various activities lined up. We have stalls for different vendors. I'd also like to add these vendors from the LGBTI community. This is a platform for our community members who have things to sell, great awareness for. So this is a platform for them. As well as various civil society organizations, because many times the youth do not know where to go when they have a problem, when their rights are violated. So this is a platform where we're bridging the gap between access to information as well as entertainment. Speaking of that, we have various artists also coming through to perform, as well as different people in making like that. So we're urging everybody that's able, willing, and capable to please come and join us. It's an all-inclusive space. It is for us, for the community, by the community, including our allies. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much to the members of the media and civil society organization and our allies in our community for supporting us throughout our social movement. We are queer, we are here, and this is definitely our country too, and we belong, and we cannot wait to celebrate inclusivity and equality with our fellow Namibians. So we hope everybody shows up to hopefully Namibia's largest Pride Week yet, and a week to celebrate intergenerational equality. With that, we'll take any questions from the members of the media and the public about any of the agenda points we have discussed today. In the acts of parliament today. It is not a law that was written by a democratically elected Namibian government and Namibian people. It is a law inherited from a white supremacist, colonialist, apartheid regime, first and foremost. The law basically gives powers to the police and private citizens to arrest and detain people they believe are committing sodomy, but only between men. And it also allows police and private citizens to arrest and use deadly force during the arrest and to arrest persons that they believe are committing sodomy without a warrant. This is a law that violates a slew of articles. Article 8, dignity. You may not be subjected to cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. To tell a private citizen that they can lock me up for who I love without a warrant and to use deadly force is cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. It violates your right to privacy. It violates your right to equality. Why equality? Because there is no law that says women and women cannot love each other. But there is only a law that says men and men cannot love each other. How gender equal are we in a born-free Namibia if that is a law we are going to maintain? The government likes to say that this law is not enforced. The gay community are persecuted. Then why is there been 64 arrests from 2003 to 2019 for sodomy? This law is enforced and it's used to create a cloud of fear and discrimination placed upon gay men in this country and the large LGBTQ community, and to that we say no more. So, what is being done to push for the decriminalization? Thankfully, and I am so blessed that I am youth in this country that has a minister of justice that is fighting for justice for all in this country. Perhaps one of the most only ministers that are actually using the public office to stand up for what the oath of office entails. So for the first time we have a Minister of Justice that has taken up the Law Reform and Development Commission's report recommending that this law be repealed. Not even replaced, but repealed. The Law Reform and Development Commission has been working on this report along with civil society organizations for decades. But we haven't had a Minister of Justice with the political will, with the authentic leadership, and with justice at the heart of what they do to take up this report. So we vehemently thank the Minister of Justice for giving justice to all of the beings. The Minister of Justice has tabled the report to Cabinet. Cabinet has not approved or denied it. And to that we are disheartened. However, the report will now go to a Parliament Standing Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs, and they will then host public hearings and public consultations about decriminalizing the sodomy law. So democracy is working, but justice has not prevailed yet. And we will fight for this right until justice and equality prevails. I will hand it to my colleagues to talk about pride, but I just want to say one thing. Pride is about visibility and representation because representation matters. For too long, the closet has confined our community. For too long, homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, and sexphobia has confined our communities to the margins of society. And if we do not fight for our rights, if we do not come out of the shadow, we have everything to lose. Everything. And that is what pride is for. It's to say that you belong. The gay boy from Maribel belongs. The transgender woman from Damaraland belongs. The intersex person from Zambezi belongs. The bi person from Omanguena belongs. We all belong, and that is what Pride is about, and this Pride is about belonging while celebrating intergenerational equality.
Well, I think they just want to reinforce it as a mutual, yes, visibility matters, and yes, the time is now. We don't get to celebrate and be visible, and we were important to be able to welcome out whoever it is into the celebration so that they are able to have a sense of community, so that they're able to build the necessary networks and support systems in order for them to be able to reach out, whether it's for psychosocial help or whether it's to be able to sit down with somebody that's maybe going through the same experiences that they're going through. So Pride is as much as it's a celebration of our recognition, as much as we're coming out onto the streets and into all of the various venues that we're going to be entering in, it's very much about inviting in and welcoming in whoever it is that is there to help them understand that yes, you belong, you matter, you are worthy, you are here, and you are queer. And if that is enough, then we're good to go. Zindri, you want to say something on Pride?
Yes, I'd like to add on, the meaning of Pride for me is the opposite of shame. Because we believe that the strongest tool in the hand of the oppressors is the shame that has been implanted for generations of queer people in this country. And that doesn't go for our generation, it goes for our parents' generation, it goes for our ancestors, that were shamed by a colonial regime for sexual fluid practices that were quite common, and that the colonial regime actually saw as problematic because that regime installed Christian values and all that came with that. And so we're not only fighting for future generations for ourselves, we're fighting for the recognition that queerness and queer people always existed. And they always made major contributions to this country, and they continue to do so at all levels of society. And what we're trying to take away is the shame that individuals have ingrained in themselves, and because of that, they are not able to live their full lives, to get to their full potential, and to contribute to this society as much as they could and would like to do. So this is really important for me, and it's not only for queer people, very importantly, it's for all those allies that believe that we are equal, and that my equality cannot trample on your equality. Right? So really this I just wanted to add because I think it's very important.
And of course, that is essential because, especially with COVID-19 having come here and disrupted most of all of our lives, it is especially important and wonderful to be able to come out in all of our color, with all of our community, to be able to not only abolish shame, but also stand tall and very proud.
So to answer your question about some of the ways in which ultimately queer people and communities are not equally protected by the law, or also importantly think about not equally included by the law. There's a few laws that directly leave the group out. For example, the Domestic Violence Act and the Rape Act refuse to acknowledge same-sex relationships. So that obviously is deals with rights to protection on a very fundamental level. There's obviously rights to freedom and dignity around the sodomy law that Amar's already spoken to. Freedom to express oneself, freedom to, and obviously without being included into marriage laws, have implications on your ability to have a family, so rights to family, rights to love, rights to relationship, all these rights are human rights that are violated by not being included in our law or being excluded by our legal frameworks. And of course that's just on a legal level. If you start going on a policy level, you look at school policies, police policies, without our state acknowledging the existence of LGBTI people, their needs are completely neglected. And so it means there is no protection of their rights on an equal level. I hope I've answered everything. I could go on and on.
Just bring something very quickly before I hand over to Philip. It has been 4 bills tabled in the August House this year. 2 of them deal with reforming the Magistrates Court and the High Court, where they would fund their pockets without funding the Namibian people and uplifting them. No bill on universal basic income, no bill on land reform, no bill on protecting the environment like Namibia Africa is doing. And we are getting to this point is that they made sure that one of those bills is a homophobic bill, and that is the Domestic Violence Act. It explicitly says that violence will only be protected or prosecuted in opposite sex relationships. So government literally is saying that they are sanctioning domestic violence in same-sex relationships and only protecting persons who experience violence in opposite sex relationships. That is how state-sanctioned homophobia affects the Namibian people. And also lastly, the same minister who is leading all of these more than 9 LGBTQ court cases, Minister Kawana, is the same minister who in 2004 removed sexual orientation from the Labour Act of 1992. LGBTQ rights are not new rights we are asking for. We've had these rights. The Constitution recognizes these rights. We are asking for the exact same rights. Sexual orientation was covered in a bill from 1992, but Honorable Kawana went and removed it on the basis that we are illegal, apparently, and criminal. And that's also how the sodomy law is used to suffice and sanction other homophobic laws. So how are you going to appoint a minister that has proven his homophobia and violates his oath of office to lead a ministry that has so many LGBTQ court cases? That is strategic ways to target the LGBTQ community, and it is disheartening and it is at the expense of the Namibian taxpayer dime.
Sorry, if I can just add something real quick, just building on what I wanted to say, but also with regards to the meeting on Pride, I think what has been misunderstood or has been confusing is that identity personal interpretation is not about pushing queerness, it's about pushing the queer agenda. It really is not an attack on people who identify as heterosexual or heteronormative. It's literally taking what should be ours, being able to enjoy our rights, being able to just live freely and enjoy our presence and just be a part of the fiber community, much like everybody else. So it's not about pushing queerness, but pushing the queer agenda, which is totally within our rights.
Yes, I'll get to your question about the DNA issue in the case of our children. So all our children were born through surrogacy in South Africa. And South Africa, as you may know, has full equality, constitutionally protected, and so surrogacy and all kinds of other things are equally open to same-sex families or any other kind of family composition that you could think about. And so we followed the South African framework, which requires that before you start the surrogacy process, the High Court has to approve an agreement between you and the surrogacy, which protects all parties and makes very clear what the expectations and the outcomes of this agreement are. And one of the outcomes that the court then stipulates is that the so-called commissioning parents are the parents from the date of birth, for all intents and purposes. And that, again, protects both parties. So, the commissioning parents will know that they, will have their children, and the surrogate equally knows that she will not sit with a child that she did not want. Surrogates, have to have their own children. They have to be very much aware of what they're getting into, which is, of course, in order to protect, exploitation of women and all that kind of thing. Now, the effect of that is that, from day of birth, we were both recognized as parents, and the birth certificate is issued in our names. And so, while we all understand that biologically speaking, two men cannot yet, perhaps, have children that carry both of their DNA, because I think in terms of technology we're very close to um, that does not matter, because from date of birth, both of us are parents. And so what happens is that suddenly, we selectively, Home Affairs did not recognize the South African birth certificate. In any other case, with children born to Namibian citizens in South Africa, a birth certificate would be taken at face value, that they're real children. And I think the judge recognizes this in his judgment, because he said, if in Namibia we would subject any family to DNA tests to prove real paternity, we would not only, find, quite a lot of, unexpected cases where that might not be the case, but it will really have big and unintended consequences. So it cannot be a case that the biological link is the only prerequisite for paternity, and indeed the Constitution doesn't speak of a genetic link at all. Where this DNA issue came from is a misinterpretation of the Child Care and Protection Act, which makes provision for DNA tests in cases where paternity is disputed. So if a woman, for example, falls pregnant after a rape, and whatever continues, in such cases, the Ministry of Gender, not the Ministry of Home Affairs, can then request, for example, a DNA test to sort out such disputes. In our case, paternity was never disputed besides by the Minister of Home Affairs, and the judge again recognized that the Minister of Home Affairs has no business in disputing our heritage if we don't do it ourselves. So I think that's why, from the very beginning, we resisted or we rejected the notion that we should undergo DNA tests. Because what would that do? That would essentially say that only the one of us who has a genetic link is the parent of our children. That's just not right. We know who are the parents of our children. We are, and they also know that. And so, certainly we have not taken a DNA test, and we will not do that. And I think again, we believe strongly that the Constitutional Court or the Supreme Court will recognize these facts as they are.
And if I can just add very quickly, throughout this case, the minister has not disputed the certificates that were issued legally in South Africa. When we won the case, all of a sudden, now the certificate is being disputed. And listen to the reason. On the birth certificate that was issued by South Africa, it says parents. Now they are saying that is different from mother and father. The Constitution says if your mother, or not and, or if your mother or father is Namibian, you are entitled to citizenship by the same. Is Philip not Jonah's father? Is Philip not a parent? Is Philip not the parent of Jonah? Again, when it's clear matters, there's a different energy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Cloete. I work as a freelance, but really I occupy a space as an activist. And my take on your presentation is really at a philosophical level. The idea of understanding who we are, understanding our culture, our belief, these things, we can't take it away. But I also see the important role we are doing in preparing this struggle. And I understand as an activist, in preparing this struggle, some of these cases are expected because it's a new phenomenon in our democratic dispensation that we are having such an issue like this, even in our court system. I'm saying this is also an advice to you that this is also maybe with a sober mind how you should take the discourse. Because if you take the discourse as this against the government, it doesn't really be fruitful. Because how I conceive this struggle is much deeper. Because if
coming from a background of different beliefs, different culture, different systems. So I see, but I think the calmness in understanding the setup of our system, the setup of our culture in our society, it must honestly be center stage in getting this message. If the message get to reach out to, because my understanding is I'm sitting here. Globally, this case is everywhere, and court system in many countries, they are providing jurisprudence in this case. Some are, whether it's on the basis of procreation, whatever the nature might be, there are countless efforts in this effort. That, for me, how I see, I don't see that a country like Namibia, the approach they say, one would say, we didn't have a legal background or instrument to deal with this case as things were standing. And how else was the state supposed to deal with the issue without a legal instrument? This is where I think in the activism in that sector, maybe this question has also appeared as you are engaging the state, because there was no really basic to say if the only way to issue a birth certificate is on two accounts, either you are male or female. So you need to conscientize the system, the state, to open to radical reform, to uncomfortable change. So I think that should be the trajectory, perhaps, how we should pursue some of these issues. Because it's much bigger, and I only see you as somebody who is triggering the cause, and the cause doesn't necessarily end with you. It's much bigger than you, and that's really how I see. And maybe also I was trying to understand, because in your presentation you made reference to the Afro barometer, and you have not really, maybe one or two pointer how they arrived to that, what were the considerations, whether it's also the ombudsman, because you make a case that society in general, they are receptive to the issue. But I remember very well the case of Felon. There was a lot of also kind of back and forth in terms of society. When you make reference to the Afro-Barometer and the ombudsman, I was just trying to reconcile the two to understand, okay, just to see what were their highlights in arriving to that. I think something, I think initial understanding is the society that we both understand each other, not necessarily being together, but respect one another, and that's not a walk in the park. I think we need each other. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comment, and that's why we are presenting an intersectional pride week, so that we can come together and understand our community and whatnot. I will comment on the Afro-Barometer. Both of those reports are freely available to the public, and I urge you to really dissect to see what their methodology was. What's important is that Namibia is among the top 4 countries with the highest Afro-Barometer tolerance ratings for the LGBTQ community. When the activists in Botswana launched the decriminalization of sodomy in 2019 and won their case to decriminalize sodomy in the High Court, the Afro-Barometer found that after that ruling, which decriminalized sodomy in the High Court, of which the government of Botswana is appealing to the Supreme Court, the case was heard on the 12th of October, the Afro-Barometer found that there were 10 percentage points added to Botswana's overall tolerance rating. So it showed that, again, it is not society as a whole that is fundamentally homophobic, it is the policies and the state. It is state-sanctioned homophobia. Watch how the visibility and the family, the diverse family that Philip and Memo have presented, has opened Namibians' hearts. Watch how many people look up to Mercedes as a true fighter that have opened their heart. And watch that when we decriminalize sodomy, which we will, how many more Namibians are one going to come out of the closet and take up space, And how many more allies are going to open their arms to us and say we belong? Because this is one Namibia and it's one nation. And watch how our Afro-barometer ratings are going to push us perhaps into the top 2 spots of the most tolerant African nations on this country or continent.
Yes, I'd like to add to that I think there was a lot of foresight in the way that our constitution has been shaped. We have 3 arms of government. The legislative, executive, and the courts, the judiciary. And this is a matter of minority rights. And we can never expect minority rights to have to be decided based on the sort of majoritarian view. That cannot be the case, because in that case, a minority would never be able to enjoy full rights. So the fact that we're taking up this fight, through the courts, and I want to say also, I totally agree with you that there is a lot of sensitization, needed, a lot of community work and so on. So that is for sure. But what we believe is that we are taking this fight up specifically through our legal system, because the legislature has, for the past 31 years, not given effect to any discrimination, which is, it is mandated by the Constitution to do so. I think Dilo mentioned Article 18, so that actually says we must undo discriminatory and apartheid-based policies. And that has not been done for 31 years, and that has all the effects on queer and LGBTQ people in this country that we've been talking about. So it cannot be the case, and that's why sometimes even the question of statistics as to how many percentage people support gay rights, for me that is a great fact to know, but it has nothing to do with justifying the existence or non-existence of discrimination. Discrimination may not exist as per our constitution. So no matter if 12% of the people agree, or 20, or 95, that only shows us where we stand as a nation. But our constitution demands that discrimination must fall, and discrimination based on sexual orientation is not admissible. So this is the foresight that founding mothers and fathers had, and that was ingrained into the Constitution, that we are sure that we're going to protect minority rights and not, kind of do all kinds of things simply because we believe, in a democracy, the majority always rules. Because the democracies or the majority can be quite cruel, as we have seen historically, where in the name of majorities, the most horrendous human rights violations have been undertaken. So, we have our full founding fathers and others have learned from this, and again, we are simply here claiming that space, claiming that equality that they have, really embedded.
If there aren't any other questions, I think this will be the conclusion of the press conference. Again,